Hello, welcome to Darri Reviews. I'm Darri, and I review pagan witchy content and media. And today we're going to look at Stray Gods. So as you can see, it's called Stray Gods, the role-playing musical. If you don't like musicals, you're not going to like this game. The songs are very instrumental to all of the branching choices that you are going to receive through multiple playthroughs of this game, because that is a factor in this. It plays very much like a Telltale game. uh, you know there's going to be scenarios and you react to them in various ways, you get options, so forth. And a lot of people are going to hate this game right off, just out of, you can tell that leftist people made the game. Now, while this is something I appreciate, I know this is something that not a lot of people are going to like, including the fact that they basically say, hey, this game is made on stolen ground, and yeah, just various things like that, acknowledging that, it's an American game and a bunch of stuff. But yeah, you could pause to read. And this game also has trigger warnings for these things. And it also, as you can read here, it basically sort of prepares you for, like when you click on these within the game section, it actually gives you at least a little bit of why it's important to the story and how it comes about, when it comes about, things like that. While I do think this could have been implemented better, this is something I think more people need in their games for a lot of times, because especially as someone who, has a problem with quite a few of these and other issues, I appreciate a warning that's not just, oh, this is rated M or whatever. And I think part of my problem is mostly just because the way that they did this is literally just when you first get into the game, this shows up and it contains spoilers. I feel like I would almost rather just know that these are there, maybe a short non-spoilerly blurb, and an option for like, hey, warning, this is about to come up, even if it's just like a small icon. But that's my idea. There's probably reasons that that wasn't implemented, and probably reasons that it won't be in other games. But I do think that a system like that could be beneficial with more games like this that, innately deal with these subjects. So in this game, you play as Grace, who is a struggling singer, seemingly in her early 20s, still trying to kind of figure out life. This game is very vibed towards that age. While I certainly think people not of that age range can enjoy this, it is definitely the focal point of the audience. Like, they basically went for probably an incredibly niche audience, but at the same time, they went for it effectively. The scenario that Grace finds herself in relatively early is that she's holding auditions, and one of the auditions, someone named Calliope comes in, and you later find out that it's actually Calliope from Greek myth. And the majority of the characters that you come across are going to be of Greek myth. This is Persephone, this is Apollo, and this is Pan, and they're all romance options. They're also all uniquely fantastic. Now, unfortunately, Calliope ends up dying in front of Grace, and this sends what they call an eidolon from Calliope to Grace, making her the next Calliope, literally, as in eventually it is described that she is going to start gaining the memories of Calliope, and, and this includes generations. Like, this is just how the Greek gods exist and still exist, is that whenever they die, their eidolon goes to someone. Usually it's someone of their own choice that they've kind of groomed for the position, and other times it's not. And that's what they're afraid that Grace is. Grace is accused of her death and must prove her innocence. That's all relatively, early game, so while I apologize for spoilers, this is a review. I will try not to be too spoiler heavy, but at least some early game ones and things that I find interesting that add to the review are going to happen. Now, one of the mechanics I really like is that you get personality traits, and this kind of works like whether you're being Paragon or Renegade in Mass Effect. You get specific choices based on whichever thing you choose. You can be charming, which is kind of like really flirtatious. You can be kick ass, which is like you're kind of innately violent. Like a lot of the options are violent. A lot of the options are also just like you're aggressive, but they're the, how do I put this? You are not standoffish and willing to make incredibly bold decisions. And clever is effectively like you're smart. Like if you choose clever, you don't have to ask people questions. You arguably don't have to, but if you want to go through all of the options, a lot of them are, hey, what's this? If you're clever, you automatically get an option that kind of like at least vaguely assumes that you know. And for anything that the character itself wouldn't know, that's what you have her for. Her name is Freddy. She is your mortal companion, roommate, also a romance option, and fun. Now, as I said earlier, a lot of this game is going to be investigative, and this is what it looks like when you investigate a room. You basically choose an option, and either things happen, you notice something, or you don't, but you're never gonna. The good thing about this game is that you can actually go through all of these options. It doesn't like say, oh, you can only pick three and then whatever happens happens. It it wants you to play the game and to experience itself. And a lot of these are going to be funny, like such as, Elvis picture, Warhol painting. All of these options have a sense of humor to them. And while sometimes a little forced, it's never unwarranted. Like, I usually at least chuckle. And of course, through the course of the investigation, you are going to talk to the other gods, some of which are pleasant towards you, some of which are not, some of which there is attention. But yeah, my personal favorite was Pan. Charismatic, mischievous, but not necessarily like Tom Hiddleston Loki ish. He was definitely his own character and just fun, especially as a romance option in my first run. But I do think most people are going to enjoy the cast of characters and, go through the variety of options and each time it be a worthwhile experience. That being said, it is notable to mention that there are game ending choices, as in there are decisions that you can make that Grace dies and that's game over and you reload the save. I've only come across two in my two playthroughs, but there is likely more. Also, if you're expecting something that is incredibly loyal to the ancient Greek literature, this game is not going to be it. And the game brings that up, and it is sort of a focal point because of how drastic some of the differences are. Not the least of which is that a focal point, again in the beginning of the game, is that Persephone killed her husband. The game definitely implies in such a way that the Eidolon didn't go to anyone, so Hades is gone. Which is going to be the case with many of the gods. I do believe that they didn't want to overburden themselves with trying to write in, everyone that's on Olympus and every god that could be popular and just keep to the story they had, which is smart. And I do think they went about this the good way in just explaining some of the gods are gone, some of the gods are still alive, just not here, and some of the gods that are still alive have very tragic reasons for not being there. One of my favorite characters as well is Hermes, who they took a very interesting approach with. Hermes is also known being the youngest Eidolon before Grace, and is a trans man, and it is both. It's never outright stated, but it's heavily implied, and a lot of the conversations, it's obvious. Like, he states that his predecessor thought it was appropriate because Hermes is a god of transition. That being said, despite being a musical game, some of the songs seem kind of forced, but they all feel impactful. You're never not having a good time. I feel with everything that I've said, with all the themes that I've mentioned, you're going to know if you like this game or not from this review, and probably arguably if you just know that it's a musical based around Greek gods. If you're not looking for a really lore purist kind of game, this is a good fun time. As long as you can handle these themes being rather predominant. But if you haven't yet, I rate it, try it out. So this is part 2 of my review of Stray Gods, just talking about things I did not talk about in part 1, and I'm going to touch on the DLC. As the comment says, the artwork might not be for everyone. That's very much a personal choice, but it does sort of affect my review and other reviews of it. Like, I personally like it. It's very simplistic, but there's that. And while I said it plays like a Telltale game, it is not fully animated like a Telltale game. You're basically going to be looking at a motion comic, more or less. You're going to be seeing a variety of still images for this. So that may be a factor of the experience of playing. Although sometimes the backgrounds are animated. Though some people might not like the simplistic art style, and a lot of background characters are effectively just vaguely shaped shadows that happen to be moving. It's a focal point, and it is very much an independent game, so I'm not too worried about it. Although an important thing that I did miss in part 1, which I'm very surprised about, because it was something that stood out, is that sometimes the different voice actors will pronounce different Greek words and name differently in the same conversation, and oftentimes in conversation with each other. Like, they're talking about the same thing and actively having a conversation, but they're both using different pronunciations. So I do think that can throw quite a few people off. The game also has a DLC called Orpheus, where you play as Orpheus, refinding love. Basically, from the events of the first game, he is seemingly given a second chance at life. As before the DLC, he looked like this, and was, a ghost. So Hermes takes him to the world, and he experiences it, and obviously, he's a fish out of water, being that he is literally Orpheus, so he went from ancient Greek times to what is supposed to be now, and the culture and everything else going on is obviously humorous, and his interactions with Hermes for this are fantastic, and it's cringy, but in the best way. This is also a very short DLC, so I think a lot of people might have some qualms with paying $15 for it, but I don't think it was too short, and I think the fact that the writing in both the dialogue and the songs are a lot more compact. I do think they just had, the focus and everything to make this a really good DLC for the people who would enjoy this game. And the DLC is definitely some of the top tier of the game. I also really like that playing as Orpheus, it doesn't feel like you're just playing as Grace in a new skin. You are playing a completely different character who, while, very similar in, one could say, ambitions and interest, it's very much a very different character. That's something that I always enjoy, because I do think sometimes people, whenever they do games, have a habit of the main character always acting like the main character instead of their own. And because we meet Orpheus before this DLC, it's a very natural progression, such as we are playing the character in the DLC that is from the game. So they put a lot of effort into this game, which obviously, no matter what, making a game is effort, but at the same time, going through and making sure that the writing for the DLC is this good is mwah. So my overall opinion still stands. If you enjoy musicals, you enjoy Greek mythology, this is a game to at the very least try out and see if it's your vibe. Especially since other pantheons and mythologies are actually mentioned in this game, so it seems somewhat implied that they may be willing to do a sequel where at the very least other gods and other pantheons are at the very least characters, if not a focal point in their own right. I'll admit that's conjecture on my part, but I definitely wouldn't mind seeing some more obscure mythology show up in a sequel. Be sure to ask questions in the comments, and I will answer them to the best of my ability, or, just your own thoughts about the game if you've played it yourself, or other reasons that you thought you might not be super interested if you have not. And a compilation of the review and all the answers of the questions will show up here on this channel, which you can find by searching my username. As always, thank you for watching, and be free to leave comments of other things you want me to review.